Hey everybody, today is Sunday, February 20th, and this is Booksy. We're going to be talking about AMC stock. Yeah, I had a rough week. Basically, um, got really sick, felt like I was going to die, but ain't nobody got time for that. So we got over it and back on our feet, trying to play catch up now. So AMC had a really weird week. If you were to look at the overall picture, not a whole lot actually happened. I mean, granted, we did have some bigger moves last week, and we had one in the middle of the week, but it's kind of like right where we were. I mean, the difference is down a few percent over the whole week. Um, and if you were to look at volume and just sort of base it on, okay, bearish or bullish, right? Yeah, like it's a decrease in volume. You can see that the bearish volume sort of stays. I'm sorry, this thing keeps toggling up. The bearish volume kind of stayed pretty flat all week. If you look at the amount, it did diminish a bit as well. Bullish volume diminished a bit, but the larger bars here, and this is important, are bullish. And ever since we kind of hit this particular bottom here, I mean, you can just see it. It's like inverted, basically. So the larger sections have been green, all right, buying. And over here, all of the larger sections, minus a few small areas, right? These are all red. So I feel like we have, for the most part, turned, and like the sentiment towards the stock is that way as well. We've been there before, right? Specifically back in this region when we were all very young, and specifically right here after this big run, everybody was really pumped up. The good news is that, if we're looking at this just objectively, and we're just saying, like, okay, what's happening in this region? Well, from here, really, I mean, if you scrub out just these two moves right here, this move and this move, all right, these are both, I think, about 30% moves, something like that. Yeah. Um, there has not been very much green on the way down. I mean, outside the little like 15% or 8% here or there. So this particular region, we've had quite a few large moves, right? We had over the course of a few days a 26% move. We had a 35% move, and then we had a very large 42% move. So these are significant moves to the upside, which definitely to me indicates, well, a volatility, but also just a change in momentum. So one of the difficult things about this region, and I've been talking about it for a few weeks, and I just want to lay it out there because when you look at stuff like this, where I show you like three different paths, it can very much seem like, okay, Booksy, you don't know what you're talking about. So you're just kind of grasping at straws and just throwing a bunch of random stuff out there. Well, look, the truth is, if I'm wrong, and I could be, if I'm wrong about something, it doesn't really matter. And if I'm right about something, it doesn't really matter. Like, part of this is, sure, like trying to get to a point where we're making more and more accurate predictions. And we are, by the way. I've been going through my charts, like screenshots of my old charts, and I've combed through and I've probably picked out about 100 or so. Most of them are more recent, which makes sense, where we've not only gotten good data from something, but we've called it out correctly. Specifically, after this drop in mid-January, a lot of this has been more accurate. And there are times, like I remember in this region, I had some really strong, and in this region, right, these lower pockets here had some really strong opinions about springs, and we saw those things react certain ways. And um, but then right around here, I was kind of lost and unsure about the next steps. When we get to this region, it's been pretty much on point, and I had drawn this particular line right here out several days ago, early in the week, I think, and basically, like, it's played out almost exactly as it did. Now I did tweak it a little bit. I think originally I had it so I thought the drop was going to be a little earlier, something like this. Okay. I think I had it maybe over here a little earlier. And that's the one thing that's been really difficult is like timing. Um, I either think things are going to be too fast or too slow. And even looking at these right here, I'm going to tell you right now, I think there's a possibility, just based on what I've been looking at just today, that this is actually kind of slow and slower than everyone's thinking it's going to go. And even this pink path, which is kind of like my middle path, which stretches out into March and April and June. Um, by May and June, we'd be up in the upper regions, but even that path to me seems a little fast. And the more I stare at these fractal charts, the more I feel like I think outside of an actual squeeze, just really pushing us up hard, I really don't think the process of moving up is going to be as violent, and I don't feel it's going to be as quick. And I know I've already had people say like, no, it's got to be faster. And interestingly, I was expecting it to get faster if this dipped earlier in the week, because the earlier it dipped to fill that gap, the tighter I can draw this curve, right? I can draw this curve much tighter. I didn't end up changing the orange curve, and it kind of hit like perfectly, which was a nice call out. And it laid right on it and then bounced on Friday. It doesn't mean it's going to respect it at all come Tuesday, but it does mean that, we're getting better, I think, at understanding maybe the timing. These momentum arcs are not like set in stone. You can see it passes through them, it follows them at times, but at other times it's kind of like ambiguous, right? And you're not really sure. I'm the reason that I have 3 overlapping ones right here is because this inner blue one is this relating to this side of a bracket, right? And then this would be the other side. And you see how this line that's on top of here, you see how when it comes through and it completes the arc, it finishes that line? That's not a coincidence. That has to do with what I observed way back in the day, which is that basically when you have here an arc, it basically creates, if you were to draw a line on this side, you can see that the top essentially over here becomes like the bottom. Like we cross over, and I think to some degree this may be like your creek if you're into Wyckoff. That might be the way it would be visually drawn if you had the sine wave here, right? Something like that. Maybe it's a little tighter. So I'm looking at these things and I'm saying, okay, well, the reason I drew the arcs the way I did several weeks, I mean, almost over a month ago now that I drew these initially, is because I was looking at these as one half of a bridge. And so on the other side, so for instance, this line and this line are competing in my mind because you got multiple touch points here and on this one. But I'm favoring green right now, this light green line, as sort of the top of this particular cat ear sequence on this side, right? Which is a full like T1, 2, 3 sequence with a spring. And on the other side, you would expect something similar. Now you can see I haven't really drawn that. So the question is like, well, why haven't you drawn that over here, Booksy? Well, I had originally. But then you start looking at the inside here, right? And it's like really hard to sort of reconcile these shapes with this idea of, this fractal playing opposite this fractal and having it line up perfectly. You can't really draw it here. It's just it's like too much minutia, right? The other problem here is that on these arcs, though they all arc up like this, there's actually other examples of springs where this bottom is basically just like it's a cone, right? Like it's very pointed, like a big old upside down Dorito chip. And then there's other times where it's very flat, like it comes down, it remains pretty flat and then comes up. So there's so many different examples of these things. So trying to understand like the relationship of one half of this bowl to the other is challenging. The reason why I have so many is because all 3 of these little circles are possibilities. There doesn't mean they're all equally likely. Like if I had to give them a percentage, I would say this is like 10%, this is like 10%, and this is the one that I'm looking at that's maybe 80%. Or maybe it's more like 15, 15, 70, something like that, right? And I feel like this double up thrust to me looks a lot like this double top here, like a volcano top that comes after the first push. The confusing thing is whether or not this is actually the bottom. And I've been looking at this particular shape, I showed it in other videos, right here and right here, and it kind of matches, it kind of doesn't. So it's a weird problem, and I'm not 100% certain that it is the bottom. So that would be your bear option. Okay. If we need to finish the bottom and it looks like this big bouncing bowl thing, it's possible that we need to come down and go into that spring lower. That's still on the table. That would be a drop all next week, basically. And I don't think it would be this straight down. I think it would be like sideways for a bit, right? More or less listing this away. So the way I drew it, maybe a little extreme. It may not actually get down there till a week out. And we'll know soon enough, right? But that's an option. If we are in fact more or less in this middle region, then really we just need to finish the fractal that we talked about a bit in the last videos, which is this repeating ABC looking thing. So this is confusing, but these are stacked fractals, and I'm doing another video about fractal iteration and how they nest, but I haven't gotten it done. I got really sick this week, so I just haven't been able to do it. But yeah, basically ABC and then ABC, and then we're looking at a large A. So if this were B, then it would look kind of like this sideways action here, and then it would just rip all the way up into the C, which is this red top area, which would make sense. It would fit pretty well, and that would be like this pink or this green even, depending on how high it goes. And then you would basically start all over, but do it for so you can see with the pink, you would start all over, but you would do it for and again, I really think this is going to end up being a lot wider, because if this drops, which is sort of what I'm suspecting it might do, this will end up being like lower, like flatter. And that means that this sideways action would probably end up being much, much longer, like dragged out over several weeks, maybe even a month, all of March, to get to that next push up. And I don't think it's out of the question. I think if you look at the timing of what's going on, it's still taking a long time for things to happen. We will see. Okay. That being said, the bear option still exactly as it was. It's basically just finishing it with that particular shape that we've been talking about, and that would probably end up being around, $11 to $12.50, $13, something like that. And it could dip very low, very, very fast, right, at some point. But I've presented this earlier. It's kind of interesting. If you see this shape right here, I actually presented the same thesis way over here. I was thinking that this was going to be that shape, and it kind of is, but it kind of isn't. You see that? Isn't that interesting? So like, I know that even though we didn't quite get that one quite right, it wasn't, it might have been there. Like it might have just been set up higher, or again, it could be the positioning was slightly different. These arcs have been pretty darn bulletproof, and they've been really good. So this green one is the one I'm most unsure about, and then this one I'm just kind of like this blue one I basically never changed. And it was like rock solid. It hit this. I mean, I had this drawn for a while, and it came through, and I think I finished messing with it back here, but then it really perfectly like got this, and yeah, and then we started seeing that this 1, 2, 3 business was happening again, and it was repeating the same sequence. So that's why I'm not 1,000% sure about anything going into the week. But I am saying that right now it seems to me that there are quite a bit of overlapping sequences on different time frames, and the one that makes the most sense to me is not the green or this, but actually kind of a middle of the road option. Which is something that I've been looking at quite a bit today. And basically, that just kind of assumes that we got the double F thrust out of the way, but we're going to come down. We've got to finish this particular shape here, but this shape is not actually like this is the actual bottom. So this is, you see how this one kind of broke out and it creates the bottom of the green one, the next green one. The blue one, it broke out of there and created the bottom. And this happens on the micro on these arcs because these arcs are momentum arcs, right? They don't represent strong like trend lines per se, but rather like direction. And in that case, they broke out and it actually happens quite a bit. I was looking at these on the micro. It breaks down, comes up, and then I was thinking this right here was this platform right here. But it's super sideways, right? And it's starting to look more like this tiny action here. And then if it did it again, right? There's another platform. Then you would expect it to sort of break down one more time. You see that? And we didn't really get that yet. So I anticipate some kind of a breakdown. And then this bottom, wherever it is, and I'm just estimating it might be on this trend line here, like a final test of this blue line. So maybe around like 15, well, excuse me, around like 16, something like that, 1650. Maybe that ends up being the bottom of our orange arc. And then we can go in and we can say, all right, finally, we've got another touch point on the orange arc. We change it, and then we can see that, okay, in order for this to work and have this action, you're going to have this large, mountain shape here, right? And it's going to end up being way over here where we do this kind of flat business and break out. Yeah, basically, I'm thinking right now that by the end of the week, we should hopefully have the bottom. And we definitely will know which one of these paths we're on. But then also, we will probably have an idea of where the bottom of this orange arc finally is. And we may even, at some point this week, depending on how quickly this goes, may even get the top, right? And then we'll really have a strong structure in place. Beyond that, I'm really not seeing much else going on this week. So really going to have to wait and see what happens. I'm not going to go into high detail right now about why I think this or that or the other for these different things. Like I said, this has mostly to do with the bottom view. This seems to have the most consideration of the overlapping fractal action. That would be these three arcs. And then also looking at this on like a macro, super macro time frame being over here, midterm time frame being over here, and then maybe even being elsewhere, right? On like another time frame. I mean, you can see this kind of looks like its own structure, and that we're kind of doing this business over here about to drop. And that's more on like a short term. Okay. So I can see the red working out, but maybe even being a little wider. All right. And the tops for that right now are, I'm not even going to talk about green. Green kind of is like a really bullish scenario where basically we're sort of further along even, where we're doing this right here. And we're really just going to start going up. And that would be a super tight. So that's the only other instance that I can think of right now. That would be the most bullish scenario. And that would be very, very quick. And we would probably be up here by mid-March or by earnings, but maybe after earnings, right? We'll see. Again, that could be stretched out a bit too. Okay, and this does take a bit of time. You can see the length at which it takes here to here is probably about the same as this region. So fast, but not super fast. All right. Yeah. And then, yeah, considering the way these fractals are iterating, like they're repeating, they're changing a little bit in scale, we would want to see them keep going. In terms of price targets, I think conservatively, if I'm just looking at this arc, the way that I've drawn it now, $28 conservative top, come back down to maybe that $20 region, go sideways a bit, and then break again, and then you would come back up to either just above or just under 32. And 32 is that level that had that R1 that we never popped. We lost it here. I had tracked that for a long time. It's right in here. And I really do think once you pass 32, you get a brief retrace, but you're going to move like pretty fast after that. And if we were to do that, I already told you what the price targets were for the bearish scenario. But But yeah, I think if we were to do it a little slower, we could see this kind of meandering this week. You see how this kind of bounces and just sort of slowly moves sideways? Like that could happen, where it's kind of taking its sweet time. Um, I don't know how they could drag it all the way into earnings. I know earnings got moved up to March 2nd or 1st or something like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, you can see how this sideways action stretched out could create something like that. Now, if that happened, again, we'd have to redraw this arc. It could mean that this takes a whole lot longer. Um, but that would make sense that this could be like an earnings bump right here. And that doesn't happen till that point. So, anyways, that's really all I got for you today. I don't want to go through any other charts. I hope you all have a good one, and I will talk to you on Tuesday.